Welcome to part 2 for the best of on season 1 of Beyond the Checkbox, where you learn how to integrate more mental wellness into your organization through frontline leaders. We were very excited to have our first season because we've been so passionate about mental health. We wanted to get those who are on the front lines, bringing in their knowledge, their expertise, getting them into the studio. And of course, 2020 happened, COVID-19 happened, and we weren't able to bring people into the studio, but that gave us an opportunity to get literally in the living rooms of our guests, some amazing podcast guests who were able to tell us so much about living and working and being a leader in this very tumultuous year. So welcome, thank you for joining us for the best of 2020 season. That's season 1 of Beyond the Checkbox. Enjoy the best of part 2, season 1, here you go. We had the distinct pleasure of sitting down with the CEO of EdApp. And EdApp is a very scalable learning management system that has absolutely exploded during 2020 in the COVID-19 pandemic. Why has it exploded? Because we have a dispersed workforce now. People are looking towards micro and gamified learning, where you can actually get learning into the hands in a small, short bit way to all of your employees to learn the workplace skills that we need. Darren Winterford is the CEO of EdApp. He was able to take us through the challenges and the tribulations of having a company that's grown 300% during the pandemic. Things like having a decentralized workforce, communicating to individuals in different time zones, hiring and firing with individuals in different time zones. He's able to have a small, really intimate culture with people all over the world. That is really the brilliance of what Darren has created with EdApp. We were fortunate to sit down with him, have a really strong interview. He contributed a lot to our discussion on how to bring mental health, wellness across your organization, even if you are all over the world. So I hope you enjoy the interview with Darren Winterford. How else, I imagine that COVID has modified your trajectory, changed some of your business. In fact, I'm quite confident it's helped your business because you are a mobile learning management system and you do micro learning, and learning management systems are so important now that there's really no in-classroom thing anymore. How has it shifted for you?
Yeah, what we saw was just a lot more intensity. So existing customers probably doing 3 to 4 times as much using our platforms than they had. So a real shift from whatever was in classroom straight away, right, here's a platform we can use. Where we may have been embedded with a customer in a single department, bang, right through the organization. So, we're talking, in a matter of months, we saw 300% growth, I think.
Wow.
Absolutely insane numbers. And then the same, when it comes to new customers, obviously there's there's a great deal more inquiry people are looking for. If we're going to, embark on a digital journey, let's make sure that it's not, a traditional B2B platform that might have employees tied to desktops, etc. What does a next generation learning platform look like? And obviously we've been, as you point out, that's been very beneficial for us as a market leader in this space. And so, yeah, it has been for us, it's a global tragedy, but it has been for us, it's really changed the landscape. I think there's a famous kind of cartoon where you have someone, what forced the most digital disruption in your industry? And it was like CEO, CFO, COVID-19. And for us, yeah, I mean, not just people dropping out of big legacy systems, but even, we sort of joke that the world's biggest training platform is probably PowerPoint. And the amount of people that might be in face-to-face classroom with a PowerPoint, whether it's for onboarding, whether it's for, toolbox talks, whether it's for, skills development, all of that basically, as you say, has had to come on to digital. And so, our position in the market means that that's been, very good for us.
Has there been a shift toward more micro learning? Like as traditional learning leaves bricks and mortar and leaves big institutional platforms, becomes more mobile, have you seen a shift toward more micro learning?
Yeah, I mean, that's all we do, because our platform really is designed mobile first. It's not suitable for long form learning. So, EdApp only offers, micro learning. I mean, you could make long form learning within it if you wanted to. Our learning team would strongly advise you don't. But that's all we do. And if we look at the amount of now of the larger systems beginning to talk about micro learning via, some of those larger systems from the likes of SAP, Oracle, and some of those other larger players now have a kind of mobile app version. It might still be a bit pinch and zoom and not really be a mobile first experience, but because they have one, even, they're beginning, I would say, or they're probably now really trying to embed that micro learning into their current customer base, because they see the results are so much better, the engagement's higher, and the actual learning outcomes are superior. So I think there is a huge shift to micro learning, and I think probably a few years ago there were people in the learning and development industry that were maybe a little bit skeptical. I think for a lot of them, they recognized there was a time and place for it, but they really felt like, again, micro learning is part of a blended learning solution, which we certainly agree with. But obviously with the lack of classrooms, then, that then goes. So there is this need to deliver, longer form pieces in smaller chunks, and people have that smartphone beside them. It's the most digitally relevant device that you can put learning on. And so I think the numbers would suggest that micro learning has increased, exponentially.
And let's shift like to 5 years down the road. Is it a matter of it becoming just even more mobile and more micro? Like how much more micro and more mobile can you get? And like, where do you see this going? Like, where do you see that the next edge of learning being created?
I think that whilst ever, if we look at video consumption, for example, video consumption on YouTube, on mobile is just, obviously those numbers are through the roof. And I think that video is one element that's very strong in learning, that even in classroom is used quite a lot. And I think, while ever, in the absence of vaccines, et cetera, if we think about the next couple of years, the return to the classroom in a corporate environment looks extremely unlikely. And so therefore, that digitally led learning is only going to get stronger. And in our opinion, the ability for us to even get video onto smartphones it's a known behavior. People like YouTube are doing it wonderful. We can see that the viewing statistics are there. People are willing to spend, more than just those micro minutes on their mobile watching a video. So that particular bit of media alone has fantastic application onto the mobile device. So I really can't see any limitation to, in the short to medium term, for long form moving into mobile. We certainly see that once learners are exposed to mobile learning, that within organizations, it then proliferates right through. And that usually comes from learner feedback, from people saying, that they might be in the finance department, they've seen the marketing department using, EdApp as a way to learn. And, their answer is, well, hang on, can we do everything like that? I mean, why aren't we able to also, run our learning like that? And we're seeing more and more long form, more and more long form courses come into micro learning. So I don't see an end for it. Of course, we're not out in the market saying that, micro learning is the answer to everything. And we see very successful blended learning solutions, of which micro learning is just a part. But one of the things that we've done, for example, is we now embed Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc., within EdApp. So you can actually create a lesson, create a number of pre-lessons that might be only minutes in length. And then you can actually structure a Zoom lesson as part of that course. It'll save it to your calendar on your device, so you won't miss that particular Zoom session. If you miss it, you can watch a recording of it later. But then you can proceed through that course, having those face-to-face elements, albeit now delivered by Zoom, and then back into your micro learning to embed and reinforce that knowledge. So we've even been able to blend a little bit of, let's say, COVID face-to-face into our offering. And so we're seeing that's having some, really large take up. We introduced another new feature recently, which we call, discussions. And it's a live way, again, to interact in context with the rest of the cohort that's working through that course with you. And we see that working with thousands of learners. So, of course, it has its roots in social learning, but we're able to bring that into micro learning. So, we really feel with that sort of social learning aspect, the video aspect, even the live with Zoom, we can really fulfill a lot of the requirements of a blended learning solution, on your mobile device.
So the next space that's being occupied is like socializing and democratizing, making a community out of what was previously like a lonely work kind of thing, which is on your mobile device.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've taken that, even further and looked at, how do we get learning, out of even the large corporates and into parts of society where people don't have access to it. And you're probably aware we launched a really large initiative with United Nations called Educate All, where we allow NGOs, community groups, anyone that's a passionate educator who would like to use our platform for free, they are able to do so. But the content they create flows into a public library. And that public library is inaccessible to any, what we call individual learner. So anyone that may not be a part of a team, anyone that wants to better themselves, they can actually access that public library absolutely free as long as they have a smartphone. And they can access all that same courseware that's being made available. And, there's wonderful courses on there from people like Unitar, from people like Marley Spoon, from people like Pernod Ricard, lots of our corporate partners and clients that have chosen to make that material available on the public library. And so that gives us that ability to really democratize learning and allow micro-learning to be available to those who may not be lucky enough to work for an employer that values learning and development. So we've seen a number of organizations, particularly community groups in both the US and UK, using the tool for that very purpose. So they're creating lessons. In the United States, we have a group called Design for Humanity who their sort of mission is to help, that they were formed out of the Black Lives Matter movement and helping, that segment of the population access skills development and resume development and helping them, apply for paid work. In the same way in the UK, a group of people came together that were educators that wanted to help furloughed workers who may not return to work, again, for a very similar mission, to help upskill them, retrain them, get them ready for, a role, hopefully, that they're going to be applying for when the UK economy recovers.
We also sat down with Kelly Hrudey. Now, Kelly is one of the most famous Canadians because of his extensive hockey career. Of course, he played with the great one, Wayne Gretzky, very prolific hockey career, and now he's a sports broadcaster with Sportsnet, and he works for Hockey Night in Canada. Kelly was able to come into the studio. This is just pre-pandemic, and what an amazing interview that was. I'm going to warn you, we talked a lot of hockey. We talked hockey for I think an hour straight. And then we got into the really intimate story of Kelly and his daughter. His daughter, as he and his daughter both publicly expressed, that she has OCD. And she's been debilitated with this condition at times. And Kelly talks about spending, 3 hours with his daughter, trying to help her, calm down and work through some of the obsessions and the compulsions. Kelly Hrudey will tell you that mental health is a 5 in 5 issue. He dispels the myth that it is only 1 in 5 of us who have mental health and need to take care of our mental health. Kelly is such a strong advocate for workplace mental health. We were very fortunate to have him interview in our studio, and I hope to have him again soon. A bit about parenting, because there's no easy answers.
No.
And you have 3 daughters, is that
Yes.
right? And they're all adults now.
Yeah.
And you've shepherded them through the process, and you've been been very open about your daughter's struggles with OCD.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about that journey and how that's been as a parent.
Oh, it was a mighty struggle. Still is. Still can be.
Yeah.
You worry every day. Every parent will tell you the same.
Yeah.
My wife and I used to laugh. Why are our parents so worried about us? We're in our 40s, and now we're getting it. Now we understand. But Caitlin, she's our youngest. She's now 27 years old. But when she was about 11 years old, all of us see it a little bit differently. Donna thinks she was more like 12 years old. Kate kind of thinks she was around 12, but
Yeah.
my recollection is that she was around 11 years old, and she was she had all these peculiar habits. That's what we were calling them. So she had these things, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but she'd go like this. She was always blinking her eyes randomly.
Yeah.
But not just 3, 4, 5 times. It was just like all day long, it seemed. So that was one. And then she started to beg off sleepovers. She loved dance, didn't want to go to dance class. She had all these things. And it was really interrupting her life. Then finally, for first day of grade 7, Donna was taking her to school, and Caitlin literally could not get out of the car. She was so terrified.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you were to ask Donna, she'd say, if only you could see the sheer look of fear on her face. So they drove home, and Donna opened the phone book because this is so long ago. Nobody has a phone book anymore. But that was the fall of 2004, I believe. And luckily for Donna, the first name she found in the phone book was a psychologist by the name of Dr. Kelly Mraz. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Kelly here in the city. And the receptionist said, yeah, I can get you in about 3 months. And Donna said, please, you don't understand what's going on. And she said, hang on a minute, and said, can you be here in 15 minutes? And so they made their way down to the doctor's office in 15 minutes, and it changed her life. Like, you know, it took a lot of years and a lot of work, and still is a lot of work for Caitlin. But I remember when she was 16 years old, we were having a conversation about it, and she said, yeah, it's starting to get better. I'm starting to have more good days than bad.
Yeah.
And that was quite an eye-opener, excuse me, for us as parents, thinking, holy, we've been doing this for 4 years, and you're now only having more good days than bad. And so it's a battle, but it's the greatest work we've ever done as a family. So she was diagnosed shortly after going to see Kelly with OCD and anxiety. And so we've learned so much about mental health and the battle our families had with it, battle other families have had. I think, Ryan, one of the greatest things that one of the best feelings I have is when I go into my local coffee shop every day and people come up to me because they know how open we are and they share their story.
Yeah.
Right? It's crazy how I think everybody goes through something.
Yeah.
In some different way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not completely debilitating like it was for Caitlin, but it affects everybody. This is, again, long-winded, but the Canadian Mental Health Association will tell you that 1 in 5 Canadians are affected. I say maybe it's not debilitating, but I say 4 in 5 or 5 in 5 have something. I know I do. And
Sure.
I didn't know that until dealing with Caitlin and going through all the different programs and therapies and so on. And I'm okay sharing that too. No problem.
What did you recognize in yourself when you saw what Caitlin was going through?
Well, I didn't even recognize it until my family started noticing things I was doing.
Yeah.
So I've never been clinically diagnosed, but clearly I have OCD. And a great example of it, but it doesn't affect my day-to-day where if I can't do this, it's okay. I can still get by. As an example, I travel on the road so often. First thing I typically do when I get to my hotel room, I lay out a washcloth and I take out all my toiletries and I set them there in the same pattern every single time. Now, if I don't, it's okay. It doesn't stress me out.
Okay.
But it is pretty important to me that I do that. And other things. And so my kids laugh at me, Donna laughs at me, and I have other things that I like to do. But again, that's how I think everybody's affected in some way. But I can still get through the day without any problems. Yeah. But it's certainly an issue.
Goalies are known to be, you may have heard this, a
Okay.
little bit quirky.
Okay.
And did you notice anything in your playing career that you like George St. Pierre openly talked about how his OCD was at times debilitating, but at times put him on such a wildly strict training regimen.
Right.
And he felt that he at times benefited from it.
Yeah.
And then he came out and said that he couldn't fight one year because it was so severe. Did you notice anything in your playing career that, like, call it quirks, call it routine, call it, I mean, all hockey players
Sure.
have routine, but things
Yeah.
that were, I guess, obsessive?
The answer is no. I don't think I did.
Yeah.
I don't think I had any particular quirky habits I don't think, excuse me, if you were sitting across the dressing room from me, I don't think you'd look at me and go, watch this guy. Like, next thing he's going to do is this or this or this.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been the case. But I know you have my book here. I had an episode in Milwaukee 1992-93 season where my thoughts were getting the best of me. So it was crazy. I don't know what happened. I don't know what triggered it, if there was a trigger, or if that's just where my brain was going. But in the summer leading up to that season, I had all these negative thoughts that I think I was entering my 10th year in the
What sorts of things?
I can't do it anymore. Can you keep playing? Or you can't stay at this level any longer. My brain was, Caitlin taught me this about the loop, and the loop was going round and round and round, and it was all giving me negative thoughts.
You hear that so often with OCD patients, the loop,
Right?
and you trying to break out of that loop. It's entrapping.
Well, I had no help either. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything. I didn't know about the loop. I didn't know why my brain was telling me all these negative things. And then finally I came crashing down in Milwaukee, and I was able, oddly enough, the next day we played, it was one of those neutral site games.
Yeah.
I had one of my best games of my career. And we won the game against Chicago. I had 40-some saves. We flew home, and we had a bit of a homestand, and the thoughts grew even louder, and I just couldn't shut them off.
Yeah.
Had no tools to do that, and I went in a ditch in a hurry, and I was in that ditch for almost 2 months. Luckily for me, my coach, Barry Melrose, recognized.
What did he see?
Pardon me?
What did he see, Barry Melrose? Like, what was it? How
Just
you're performing, or
Yes,
like?
and a guy that
Yeah.
I suppose that I would have looked really troubled, because I cared a lot about how I played, and I cared a lot
Sure.
about my team and
Yeah.
and the results, not only my results but the team's results. And I suspect he knew that I was in a troubled place. And luckily for me, after about a month, maybe month and a half, he helped me get help. So he introduced me to Tony Robbins, and I met personally with Tony a few times. But my first meeting with,
Wow.
it changed my life.
What was that like, meeting with Tony? Was he? When was this? Was he the?
It was
the-
January of 1993.
So was he the star? I mean, he was
Yes.
probably getting there. But
Yeah, he was. Well, I knew of Tony from the infomercials, right?
Okay.
Anthony Robbins, and he had the books out. He had the tapes that
Yeah.
you could buy, and so on. And so it was a Saturday afternoon. I'm going to say, if my memory serves me well, January 17th. It's a Saturday. We're playing at home, an afternoon game. I'm not playing, but I am backing up. Rob Stauber is going to play. I'm in my usual spot in my dressing room stall around noonish, drinking my coffee, taping my sticks, sort of the routine I had.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And Barry walks in, and right behind him is Tony Robbins, and which wasn't unusual, because I'm playing on a team with Wayne Gretzky. We had all sorts of stars coming
Wasn't
in,
unusual for Tony Robbins to walk in the dressing room.
or anybody, any big star. It was before games, after games. It was the norm, really. And
That's wild.
yeah, it was crazy. It was
Oh,
a
hey,
crazy
Tony
life.
Robbins.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah.
Welcome.
And so they walk in, and seconds later, Barry opens the coach's door, says, "Kelly, can I see you?" And this is how negative my thoughts were, Ryan. I'm thinking, that's odd. Why would Tony Robbins want to meet the lousiest goalie in the league? That's what I thought of myself.
It's incredible that you remember that thought.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it was so strong, so poignant that you can remember exactly what that thought
Oh,
was.
yeah.
When you first saw Tony Robbins, that went through your head.
Yeah.
Not like, holy shit, that's Tony Robbins.
Right? No, I
Yeah.
didn't think that. I thought, I was actually kind of worried because I knew what Tony did. I knew what I think was going to happen. And so we go in there, and Barry introduces us and says he's worked with Tony for a while, and it very much like this. That's Barry Melrose sitting in his chair.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in a chair like this, and Tony Robbins is sitting in a chair over here.
Yeah.
And Barry says, Kelly, are you interested in working with Tony? I'm hoping we can get you out of this. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, 1993. First of all, I don't think there are sports psychologists around back then.
Yeah.
And if they were, they might most likely didn't have an idea what they were doing either, because we didn't know yet.
Yeah.
And so I said, of course. And I'm thinking, oh, awesome. My coach is reaching out to me. Most coaches, I think, back then would have said, oh, let's get rid of this guy as fast as possible.
Yeah.
You know? And Barry asked, do you mind if I sit in? And I thought, no, of course not. You can sit in. I mean, you're going way out on a limb yourself. And I'd love to work with Tony. I don't like this feeling, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I turn my chair around this way. Tony's here. He stands up, and if you're not familiar with Tony, he's 6'9".
He's huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
And so I had an idea what was happening. So he stood the entire time. So he wanted to get that advantage over me right away. And then the greatest thing sort of happened, because Tony spoke like an athlete.
Yeah.
So he's swearing, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, he feels like a teammate of mine.
Yeah.
And so we went through the session. Not sure, I can't remember how long it lasted, half hour, 45 minutes.
Sure.
I was able to work with Tony again. But the greatest takeaway was that he taught me to break the loop. I didn't know about the loop, but he got me to change my thought process. And so
our last best of for the season 1 is Dr. Bill Howatt. Now, Dr. Howatt, you may know him as a foremost thought leader around the skill of mental fitness and getting mental fitness into all of our organizations. Now, Dr. Howatt wasn't always a doctor. He didn't always have 3 PhDs. That's right, I said it. He has 3 PhDs. He was an individual who says he could not read or write because of ADHD, because of dyslexia, a learning disorder, extreme anxiety. He couldn't read or write until he was 18 years old. And he attributes most of his success to a mentor that he had, who really sat him down and said, Bill, if you want to make something of your life, you have to learn some of these basic skills around mental fitness. Now, we're fortunate in the workplace across North America to be able to integrate some of the mental fitness skills that Dr. Bill Howatt talks about. We were even more fortunate at Beyond the Checkbox to have him discuss with us his approach, his life story. Such an incredible interview, and I hope you enjoy it.
You missed what I believe the most important part of my introduction is that I'm a kid that was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, spent the first few years of my life in a foster home, had the gift of being adopted by an amazing family. And through that experience, failed grade 2 and started to understand what adversity was all about, watching other people go ahead and living my entire life with a mental illness and going through that process until I was 18 years old when I learned how to read and write. Then have one human being have a conversation with me and said, hey, so you know something, Bill, it's interesting that you got here to play football, but you're not going to be able to play because you can't get through school. And she identified it was auditory and visual dyslexia and ADHD and living with anxiety. And she decided to become my mentor. So I think we're lucky in life. And the most important thing in my world is that I had one person have one conversation to make one commitment to me that changed my life. And because of that conversation, she decided that she would give me an accommodation. And because she gave me an accommodation, I was able to learn how to learn. And because of that, I went on and did, 2 undergraduate degrees and 3 masters, 3 PhDs, and a postdoctorate, because one person believed in my potential. So I've spent my entire life giving back. I don't take myself serious. I'm a bartender's son. And my sense is that you need to be a human being with other people and try to do the best you can and do it in a way that other people can actually believe you. And if they don't believe you, it's going to be hard for them to trust you. That's kind of where that to me. So other than that, it was a good introduction.
Well, yeah. So your introduction was your introduction was way better. That's conclusive. Yeah, and it's powerful because there's so many things in there. Like you mentioned that you really couldn't read or write at the age of 18. Did I get that right? Yeah.
I would be grade 6. I could sign my name and I could create an illusion. I don't know if I have a photographic memory, but I'm pretty close to it. Like I have an ability to memorize a hell of a lot of stuff because I get to sit there in the front row. I never read books. I just listened to the teacher and looked at the board. And then when I went tests, I was able to regurgitate what I needed to do to get through. And the bar for public higher education system is much more difficult, I think, now when I watch my 3 children go through it than what I went through. But I mean, back in the 70s, you know, I did okay. I got through it. I had a whopping like 50, but the reality is that I was a good kid. I didn't cause trouble. If you were a bully and didn't listen to the teacher, I wasn't probably a person you want to be around. So teachers liked me. I wanted quiet and I wanted order because my father taught me that. So very value-based, but I literally was probably between a 6 to an 8 because my Weinarch part of my brain, I wasn't able to enunciate language. So I had to learn. I don't have phonics like most people do. So the ability to hear inflection in words is different in me. So that's had to learn how to accommodate for it.
And have you ever thought about where you would be? You know, it's kind of an impossible experiment, but where would you be without that one conversation? Like, what would you be doing? Who would you be?
Probably, and I don't want to be melodramatic, but it's, you know, I've been in social isolation for 6 weeks, so I might as well just allow my thought jump to where it goes to. I remember I wrote in one of my books that a teacher, I won't say their name to incriminate them, in grade 2 said to me, Bill, you know what, you're a big kid, you're going to be a good farmhand because your brain doesn't work. And so if you think about the magnitude of those statements on children, and you're talking about me being a foster home, I won't go through what kind of trauma happens to kids in some foster homes. But what happens is that our experiences, but I was lucky though, I had Mrs. Stewart in grade 5 who said to me, said, Bill, what is the one thing you know school's hard for, would you like to do? And I said, I'd love to write a book because I couldn't even read them. She said, oh, we will. So we wrote a book called Our Trips to Warren Grove. And I wrote a little frame with my mother. It took me a week and a half to do a paragraph on the stickle something. I can't even remember exactly what it was. And that book, publishing it, I had it on my desk, and that was an inspiration. Now I've done over 60 books, and I've done over 400 articles. So what I've learned is the power of innovation, but I've also learned the power of self-compassion. You see, I had to learn how to be compassionate to myself. The world will judge you, and it'll spend a lot of time evaluating you. But until you can learn how to be okay with your own vulnerability and realize you don't need to be perfect, that's a part of why we have so many issues in our society. So the answer, I have no idea where I'd be, but I've been blessed. I ended up in Wall Street for 12 years, and my final role was a chief of staff in a multi-billion-dollar organization. How did a kid from PEI end up there? It's because of mentors, because people put me in positions to give me opportunities to flourish. And that's what I believe life is, you work hard. Yeah. I think some of it's just you get blessed where angels show up, and you just got to be ready for when the teachers come.
And, you know, through your work, that shines right through in all of your writing, all of your public speaking, and that authenticity. We talk a lot about authenticity and struggle and wrestle with what that is. And then there's sometimes you just kind of know it or you don't, you have it or you don't. And the thing that we often hear on this particular show about authenticity and leadership authenticity is about being honest with yourself and being vulnerable and balancing that with how you said it, which is like the world is evaluating you. And being a leader, have you ever struggled with that piece? Like the piece of, you know, people look at me for something. Do I have to be more polished? Do I have to be a veneer? Do I have to, you know, do I have to project something? Has that been a struggle for you at times?
It's called imposter syndrome. And it was interesting when I was in Wall Street. I'll tell you a quick story where I remember I don't know if you've ever been around investment bankers before, but some of these investment bankers that are dealing with the multi-billion-dollar deals, they're not all really pretentious, and they're not all really nice, and they're not all pricks, but some of them are really well put together. I mean, super fit, super thin, their ties are more than my car kind of things. And I got invited to dinner because they really liked me for whatever the reason. The senior people took it, because maybe I was like the odd duck. And I remember I was sitting there, and I was at this restaurant. I've never been at a restaurant this fancy in my life. And I was sitting there, I was looking down. And what was interesting, the banker looked at me and said, you have some questions. I said, well, sadly, I've never mastered the Emily Post, etiquette thing. I don't even know where to start here. And he said to me, well, I'll show you. And the thing that I've realized at that point in time, and I remember the CFO that was there, he said, Bill, here's some way you're going to survive in Wall Street. If someone asks you a question, you don't know the answer, tell them. Don't make shit up. So one of the things I realized is that we are sometimes trying to be actors. We're trying to project to the world who we want the world to accept us as, because we have some artifact or some reference point of who we're supposed to be, versus just getting really comfortable with what you have, the good, bad, and the ugly of it. And your faults that are ones that hurt other people, hurt yourself, work on those. But your perfectionism, that there's no such thing. And that's the problem in our society. And that's where I had those experiences. I still have those experiences. I still have to remind myself, I don't need to be perfect. I just have to be me. And days that that's not good enough, that's a sign to me, like the warning light on my car, that my resiliency's down and my emotions are there, and I just need to charge my battery up, and then I get perspective. So I've learned that when we start worrying of what other people are thinking, we're at the kind of the end of our rope. We're kind of fragile. Versus when we're more charged and more resilient and have more self-confidence, to accept that we're allowed to have our point of view, we're allowed to have discourse, and we're allowed not to know all the answers. And that's something I'm trying to work on. But mastery would be not there. I mean, personal relationships, I'm still a disaster by times with my own family and my kids, especially my kids. I still get too emotional by times worrying about things. But, if you have someone on a bridge with a gun or something, I'm a pretty good guy to be there with. In my professional world, I have it. So I work hard, like all of us do, is to be able to stay grounded and be able to not look at myself and actually think I'm someone I'm not. That's that's what I try to do. I don't know. How about you? What about you?
Well, in my role, as a psychiatrist, and then like also, being amongst a group of leaders in Headversity, we're having success with our organization. Like, some people are starting to know who we are. We're working with bigger and bigger organizations. And I always wonder, does it get easier or harder as you achieve more success to be more genuine, authentic, who you are, and care less? And so for you, who, as you continue to achieve success, being who you are, working hard, does it get easier? Or does it get harder for you to be comfortable in your own skin and not project projection?
Well, you would know this as a psychiatrist. At 56 years of age, I'm 7 years away from being my peak for my self-esteem. So I'm getting closer to it. So I think with age does come some wisdom. And I think what happens is I realized after, there's no parades. Like, I realized, like, these accomplishments. I remember I did my first PhD and there wasn't a parade. And I did my second one, there was still no parade. And I did my third one. Then I went to UCLA School of Medicine and taught in the medical school and did a postdoc in behavioral science. And there was not another parade. And so what I'm realizing is, at the end of the day, we create some really unusual fallacies to what it needs to be to accept it as a human being. My dad really had it right. He said, wake up every day and do the best you can for yourself so you can do the best you can for other people. After that, the rest is gravy. And so I think what happens is that we're creating illusions on the outside that create a mystical place where it's really hard to navigate for people. It's because there's quicksand. A lot of people get caught in quicksand. And you know this as well as I do. You have between 35 and 45 thoughts every minute. That's about 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day. Probability, people don't understand how their unconscious work. They're firing up 60, 70,000 thoughts, half of them, 3/4 of them are negative. And then they don't realize we have a preponderance to start to believe random thoughts. And the thoughts are just a thoughts, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, the thoughts are just a thought. And when you start believing those automatic thoughts that I'm terrible versus, I'm wonderful, so we have those folks that become narcissistic. They have to fill that pump. And then we have the other folks that they don't. So I don't know if I answered your question or not. I don't know where I went. I'm ADHD, so bring me back when I lose me.
So that is a wrap for the best of part 2, season 1 of Beyond the Checkbox. We were so excited to really start a podcast, the first of its kind, that takes mental health skills, resilience skills, brings them to you as a leader in HR, as a VP in safety, as a CEO, as someone who just wants to make a difference in their workplace. That is what we're here to do. We've been overwhelmed by the support we've had, the feedback we've gotten from listeners and viewers like yourself. We want to thank you for joining us along this journey for season 1. And of course, we want you to join us for season 2, where we have an exciting slate of guests kicking off in the new year. So from our team at Beyond the Checkbox to you, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your support, your feedback, your questions, everything that you've done to help make season 1 of Beyond the Checkbox a huge success. We will join you in season 2, and in the meantime, happy holidays.